I never imagined my life would take such a turn, where I'd be sitting here, piecing together the remnants of a story that feels like a dissonant chord in the symphony of my memories. This isn't just any story, it's the unraveling of a mystery, the kind that leaves more questions than answers, the kind that haunts you in the quiet moments of the night. It was the 1980s in Los Angeles, a time and place that felt like the epicenter of the world. The city was a vibrant tapestry of dreams and ambitions, a place where the lights shone bright and the music played loud. Amidst this backdrop, I met a figure who would become a legend in the underground music scene, a beacon of raw talent and charisma. He was more than a friend, he was a brother in arms, a fellow traveler on a road less taken. We were young, full of vigor and the naive belief that music could change the world. He had a voice that could make the heavens weep and a presence that could silence a room. I was just a regular guy, but in his company, I felt like I was part of something extraordinary. But beneath the glittering surface of fame and adulation, there was a darkness lurking, an undercurrent of corruption and exploitation that fed on the dreams of the hopeful. He began to sense at first the unease, the feeling of being watched, the whispers that turned into screams in the dead of night. I didn't see it then, I was too caught up in the ride, too blinded by the lights. Then, one day, it all came crashing down. The news hit like a tidal wave, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. He was gone, vanished without a trace after a show that was meant to be his crowning achievement. They said it was an accident, a tragic end to a meteoric journey. But I knew there was more to it. There were secrets, lies, and a truth so daunting that it threatened to tear apart everything I believed in. This is my attempt to make sense of it all, to find closure in a chapter of my life that remains painfully open. I'm no writer, words were always his domain. But this is a story that needs to be told, a lullaby for the dark, a tribute to a fallen star whose light was extinguished too soon. So, here I am, a lone voice in the wilderness, searching for the truth in a world that seems to have forgotten. But I remember it all. And I will not rest until the world hears the lullaby of the dark, the song of a soul lost too soon. Los Angeles in the 1980s was a realm of endless possibilities, a melting pot where dreams were both made and shattered. The city buzzed with energy, a place where aspiring artists and musicians from all corners of the world came to chase their dreams under the Californian sun. Neon lights illuminated the streets, and the air was thick with the promise of fame and fortune. It was in this electrifying atmosphere that I first crossed paths with him. He was a musician, not just any musician, but one who seemed to have a direct line to the soul of music itself. His name was already a whisper on the lips of those in the know, a rising star in the underground scene. His music wasn't just heard, it was felt, a raw expression of emotion that left audiences spellbound. Our meeting was by chance, at a small, dimly lit club on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where real talent often got its start. I was there purely as a spectator, another face in the crowd, drawn by the rumors of a musician who could make the guitar weep. He didn't disappoint. From the moment he stepped on stage, it was clear he was destined for greatness. His performance was more than just a set of songs, it was a journey, an experience that seemed to transcend the dingy confines of the club. After the show, I found myself face to face with him, backstage, amidst a throng of admirers. Our conversation was brief, but in those few moments, a connection was formed. He was different from the other artists I had met, humble, yet with an unmistakable aura of someone who was born to stand out. In the weeks that followed, our paths crossed more frequently. I became a regular at his shows, and we would often find ourselves talking long into the night about music, life, and our dreams. He spoke of his aspirations not just to make music, but to change the world with it, to leave a mark that would endure long after the lights faded. As our friendship grew, so did his reputation. Word of his talent spread like wildfire, and it wasn't long before the industry sharks began to circle, drawn by the scent of fresh potential. Record deals, contracts, and promises of fame and wealth were laid at his feet. It was everything he had dreamed of, everything we had talked about during those endless nights. But as he took his first steps into the limelight, I began to notice a change. The industry that promised so much began to take its toll. The once clear lines of his dreams started to blur, tainted by the very world he had sought to conquer. The spotlight, as alluring as it was, cast long and dark shadows. Shadows that would soon engulf us both. And as his star rose in the Los Angeles music scene, the darker realities of the industry began to reveal themselves. The glitz and glamour on stage were just a facade, masking a world rife with exploitation and corruption. This was a game with rules written by those in power, and the price of fame was higher than either of us had anticipated. The musician, one so full of hope and defiance, started to feel the weight of the industry's chains. He confided in me about the pressures he faced to change his sound, to conform to the market trends, to be something he wasn't. Every meeting with record executives left him more disillusioned. They praised his talent but wanted to package and sell it in a way that stripped away its soul. His behavior became increasingly erratic during this time. Some nights, he would play with a fiery passion, as if trying to burn away the reality of his situation. Other nights, he seemed distant, lost in a maze of thoughts. The industry had promised him a platform to share his music, but now it seemed like they wanted to control every note. Rumors started to circulate about a secretive group that held significant influence in the music industry. They were said to be the puppet masters, pulling the strings behind the scenes, deciding who would rise and who would fall. At first, I dismissed these as typical industry gossip, but the musician took them seriously. He told me about strange encounters, people who seemed more interested in controlling him than in his music. As his friend, I watched helplessly as the industry slowly chipped away at his spirit. The passionate artist I had met in that small club was being suffocated by a world that valued profit over artistry. His moments of paranoia and fear became more frequent. He talked about feeling trapped, watched, as if every move he made was being monitored by unseen eyes. It was during this turbulent period that we began to explore the underground music scene together. He sought solace in the raw, unfiltered expression found in the basements and back alleys of the city. These places were havens for artists who had been silenced or had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. In the underground, we found a community that shared our disillusionment with the mainstream industry. But even here, in the shadows, the influence of those in power loomed large. The more we delved into the underground scene, the more we heard stories of artists who had tried to stand against the industry and paid the price. Some had vanished without a trace, while others had mysteriously changed their tune, abandoning their defiance to fall in line with the industry's demands. Through these experiences, the musician's music began to evolve. It took on a darker, more introspective tone, reflecting his inner turmoil and the corruption he saw around him. His lyrics became cryptic, filled with references to being controlled, to losing one's soul to the machine. And amidst this chaos, our friendship deepened. The musician began to feel increasingly trapped, like a bird in a gilded cage. His success, once a dream, now felt like a chain around his neck. He confided in me that he felt watched at every turn. His phone calls were interrupted by strange clicks and silences, his mail tampered with, and he often felt followed. I tried to chalk it up to the stress and pressure he was under, but the incidents were too frequent, too calculated to be mere coincidences. At the same time, his popularity soared. His shows were packed, his music played on every major radio station, and his face appeared on magazine covers. But this success came at a price. He was no longer the master of his music, he was a commodity, traded and shaped by those in power. As his friend, I watched with growing concern. The vibrant, passionate artist I knew was slipping away, replaced by a man who was becoming a shadow of his former self. He started to withdraw, spending hours alone, writing music that he refused to perform or record. He said these songs were for himself, the last pieces of his soul that he could keep safe from the industry's grasp. Our conversations grew darker, filled with theories about the music industry's underbelly. He spoke of artists who had tried to break free, to expose the truth, only to be silenced in mysterious ways. He was convinced that he was next, that his refusal to fully comply with the industry's demands had marked him for retribution. One night, in a rare moment of vulnerability, he told me about a dream where he was on stage, but instead of an audience, there was just darkness, an abyss that swallowed his music, leaving him screaming into the void. That dream, he said, felt more real to him than any concert he had ever played. The underground scene became our refuge, a place where we could speak freely and share our fears without judgment. We met other artists who had their own stories of manipulation and control. Some had resigned themselves to the industry's demands, while others continued to resist in whatever small ways they could. As the months passed, the musician's public persona grew, but so did his private despair. The industry had given him fame, but it had taken his freedom. He felt like a pawn in a game that was rigged from the start, a game where the only winning move was not to play. But quitting was not in his nature. He began to channel his frustration and fear into his music, creating some of the most powerful and haunting songs he had ever written. These songs were never intended for the public ear, they were his way of fighting back, of keeping his spirit alive in a world that sought to crush it. And then came the night that changed everything, the night that would set us on a path from which there would be no return. It was the night of the show that was meant to be his greatest triumph, the culmination of all his hard work and sacrifice. But instead of a celebration, it became a nightmare that still haunts me to this day. That fateful night was supposed to be a turning point, a moment of triumph in the musician's career. The venue was one of the largest in Los Angeles, a symbol of his ascent to the pinnacle of the music industry. Fans, critics, and industry bigwigs alike had gathered in anticipation. There was a buzz in the air, a sense of something momentous about to unfold. But as the show progressed, it became clear that this was more than just another performance. The musician, usually so charismatic and in control on stage, seemed different. There was a raw, almost desperate energy to his performance. His songs, typically charged with emotion, now carried an undercurrent of anger and defiance. Midway through the show, he veered off the planned seat list. The band, caught off guard, struggled to keep up as he launched into a series of new songs. These were the songs he'd been writing in secret, the ones he'd vowed never to perform. The lyrics were cryptic but pointed, filled with references to manipulation, control, and the loss of identity. The audience was stunned, unsure how to react to this unexpected turn. As the final notes of the last song faded, the musician stood silent, staring out into the crowd. Then, without a word, he walked off the stage, leaving the audience in a bewildered silence. It was a dramatic exit, one that left everyone speculating about its meaning. In the days that followed, the industry was abuzz with rumors and theories about the musician's performance. Some hailed it as a groundbreaking moment of artistic integrity, while others condemned it as a career-ending meltdown. But amid all the noise, one thing was clear: he had sent a message, one that resonated far beyond the walls of the venue. For me, the show was a wake-up call. I saw the toll that the industry had taken on my friend, the way it had twisted his art and his soul. I realized that our journey into the underground was more than just a search for artistic freedom, it was a battle for his very identity. In the weeks that followed, the musician became increasingly reclusive. He shunned public appearances and interviews, turning his focus entirely on the underground scene. We spent long nights in hidden clubs and backroom bars, immersing ourselves in a world that thrived in the shadows of the mainstream. It was here, in the underground, that I began to understand the depth of the musician's despair. He spoke of feeling trapped in a cycle of fear and manipulation, unable to escape the industry's grasp. He was convinced that his defiance had put him in danger, that he was being watched and targeted for daring to speak out. As his paranoia grew, so did his determination to resist. He poured his energy into organizing secret shows and collaborating with other underground artists. He saw these as acts of rebellion, ways to reclaim his music and his voice from an industry he no longer trusted. But as we delved deeper into this hidden world, the lines between reality and paranoia began to blur. The musician's fear of retribution became an obsession, one that consumed him. He spoke of plans to expose the industry's dark secrets, to bring down the shadowy figures he believed were controlling his fate. I watched helplessly as my friend spiraled deeper into a world of conspiracy and danger. I wanted to pull him back, to save him from the path he was on, but I didn't know how. He had crossed a line, stepping into a battle that seemed larger than us both. And then, just when it seemed things couldn't get any darker, they did. The musician vanished without a trace after a show that was meant to be his greatest act of defiance. In the blink of an eye, he was gone, leaving behind a void filled with questions and a mystery that would consume my life in the years to come. The musician's disappearance sent shockwaves through the music industry and the underground scene alike. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. His fans, friends, and even his detractors were left grappling with the suddenness and mystery of his absence. In the immediate aftermath, theories abounded. Some said he had gone into hiding, fed up with the industry's control over his life and art. Others whispered darker possibilities. Abduction, foul play, or even a staged disappearance to escape the pressures that had become too much to bear. The media frenzy was relentless, each theory more sensational than the last. For me, the disappearance was a gaping wound. He wasn't just a musician or a symbol of artistic integrity, he was my friend, someone I had shared countless dreams and fears with. His absence left a void in my life that no amount of speculation could fill. Driven by a need for answers, I began my own investigation. I retraced our steps through the underground scene, talking to anyone who might have a clue about what happened to him. But the underground was a labyrinth of secrets and unspoken rules. While many expressed sorrow for his disappearance, few were willing to talk openly. Fear was a tangible presence, a reminder that the musician's, as weeks turned into months, the initial shock of his disappearance faded from public memory. The media moved on to the next big story, and the music industry continued its relentless march. But for those of us who knew him, the mystery remained an open wound. My search led me down dark alleys and into the company of shadowy figures who claimed to know the truth. I heard tales of artists who had crossed the industry and paid the price, stories that were whispered as warnings. The deeper I delved, the more I began to realize the extent of the corruption and manipulation that thrived in the music industry's underbelly. Amidst the search, I discovered something unexpected. A cache of his unreleased music. These were the songs he had written in his final months, the ones he deemed too dangerous to share. Listening to them was like hearing his voice from beyond the grave, each song a piece of the puzzle he had left behind. The lyrics were cryptic, filled with references to being watched, to fighting against invisible chains, to the struggle for freedom in a world that demanded conformity. They were more than just songs, they were a manifesto, a final act of defiance against an industry he believed had betrayed him. I realized that these songs were the key to understanding his disappearance. They were his way of speaking out, of leaving a trail for those who dared to follow. And so, I began to share them, releasing them anonymously into the underground scene where they quickly gained a cult following. The release of these songs reignited interest in his story, drawing attention back to the mystery of his disappearance. Fans and fellow artists began to rally, calling for answers and demanding justice. His music became a symbol of resistance, a rallying cry for those who refused to be silenced. But as the movement grew, so did the dangers. I received anonymous threats, warning me to stop digging into the past. It became clear that there were forces at work that wanted the truth to remain buried, forces that were willing to go to great lengths to keep their secrets hidden. Undeterred, I pressed on, driven by the need to uncover the truth. But the more I searched, the more elusive the answers became. The musician's disappearance remained a mystery, a dark chapter in the history of the music industry that seemed destined to remain unsolved. As I continued my quest, I couldn't help but feel that I was being watched, that I was treading a path that others had walked before and paid dearly for. The echoes of a broken dream haunted me, a reminder of the friend I had lost, and the battle he had fought against the darkness that had ultimately consumed him. The momentum surrounding the musician's disappearance and the posthumous release of his music reached a crescendo. Amidst this renewed interest, an unexpected event was announced. A tribute concert in his honor. This concert was meant to be a celebration of his life and work, but for me, it felt like a final performance, a closing act in the saga that had consumed our lives. The event was set in one of the very venues where he had first made a name for himself. Artists from across the music spectrum, many of whom had been influenced by his work, came together to perform his songs. The air was thick with nostalgia and a palpable sense of loss. As I walked through the crowd, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. There was sadness for the friend I had lost, frustration at the unanswered questions surrounding his disappearance, and anger at an industry that I believed had played a part in his downfall. Yet, there was also a sense of pride in seeing how his music had touched so many lives, how his legacy continued to inspire. Throughout the night, artists took to the stage, each bringing their own interpretation to his songs. The atmosphere was electric, a blend of mourning and celebration. But amidst the cheers and applause, there was an unspoken understanding that the music was more than just a tribute, it was a message, a continuation of the battle he had fought. As the final act took the stage, a surprise guest was announced. It was one of the musician's closest collaborators, someone who had been with him during the height of his career and had witnessed his struggles firsthand. The crowd fell silent as the artist began to speak, not just about the musician's talent, but about the challenges he had faced in an industry riddled with corruption and exploitation. The speech was a turning point in the night, transforming the concert from a memorial to a rallying cry. It was a call to action, a plea for the music industry to reflect on its practices and for artists to stand together in the face of manipulation and control. As the concert came to an end, I felt a sense of closure, as if a chapter had been closed. But the mystery of his disappearance remained, a lingering question that refused to be silenced. I knew that my search for the truth couldn't end here, that his final performance was not just a goodbye, but a beacon guiding me forward. In the days that followed, the tribute concert sparked conversations about the darker aspects of the music industry. Articles and documentaries began to surface, delving into the stories of artists who had been silenced, careers that had been derailed by unseen forces. The musician's story became a symbol of this struggle, a cautionary tale of talent and integrity, confronting an industry often governed by greed and control. Yet, amidst this renewed interest, there was a sense of unease. I could feel the presence of those who wanted the story to fade away, who preferred the silence and secrecy that had long shrouded the industry's dealings. The threats I had received became more frequent, more direct, reminding me that the journey I had embarked on was fraught with danger. But I couldn't turn back. The musician's disappearance had become more than just a personal quest, it was a fight for the soul of an industry, a battle against the shadows that had claimed my friend. His music, his legacy, demanded nothing less. And so, with the echoes of the final performance still ringing in my ears, I continued my search, diving deeper into the murky waters of the music industry, determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The story was far from over, and I knew that the next chapter would take me into even darker, more dangerous territory. In the wake of the tribute concert, the musician's story had become a symbol of resistance against the dark underbelly of the music industry. However, as the echoes of the event faded, a haunting silence settled in. The initial surge of attention and outrage began to wane, and the industry's powerful machine continued its relentless churn, seemingly unfazed. Determined not to let his story be swept under the rug, I continued my pursuit of the truth. This quest led me into the heart of the music industry, a world where glamour and success often masked exploitation and manipulation. My search for answers took me through a web of deceit and secrecy, meeting with insiders who spoke in hushed tones about the ways artists were controlled and careers shaped by those in power. These conversations painted a picture of an industry far removed from the ideals of artistic expression and integrity. I heard stories of promising careers derailed by refusals to conform, of artists pushed to their limits both mentally and physically, and of the harsh consequences faced by those who dared to speak out. It was a world where talent was a commodity and control was the ultimate currency. Amidst this exploration, I stumbled upon a lead that seemed to offer a glimmer of hope in unraveling the mystery of the musician's disappearance. An industry insider, who wished to remain anonymous, reached out to me. They claimed to have information about the circumstances leading up to that fateful night when he vanished. We met in secrecy, away from prying eyes and ears. The insider was cautious, their words measured, but the fear in their eyes spoke volumes. They revealed that the musician had. This revelation sent chills down my spine. The idea that his disappearance was a targeted act, a silencing of dissent, was both horrifying and infuriating. It transformed my search for answers into a mission. To expose the truth and bring to light the sinister forces at play in the industry. As I delved deeper, I began to compile a dossier of evidence, piecing together the fragments of information gathered from various sources. It was a puzzle that, when assembled, would hopefully reveal the full picture of what happened to my friend. But with each step forward, the path became more perilous. I received warnings, both veiled and overt, urging me to stop digging. My resolve, however, remained unshaken. The musician's voice had been silenced, but his story would not be. I owed it to him, to the artist he was, and to the friend I had lost. The silence after his disappearance, once a source of pain and frustration, became a canvas on which I painted the story of his struggle, a narrative that challenged the very foundations of an industry built on control and exploitation. It was a story that needed to be told, not just for him, but for all the artists who had suffered in silence, their voices drowned out in the cacophony of the music industry's dark symphony. As I continued this lonely and dangerous quest, I clung to the hope that one day, the truth would break through the silence, shining a light on the darkness that had claimed my friend, and revealing the realities hidden behind the curtain of the music world. My journey into the heart of the music industry's shadows had transformed from a personal quest into a crusade for truth and justice. The deeper I delved, the more I realized that the musician's story was a microcosm of a much larger and more sinister narrative. It wasn't just about one man's struggle against a corrupt system, it was about the very soul of artistic expression, fighting against the suffocating grip of control and manipulation. Armed with a dossier of evidence and testimonies, I began to piece together a narrative that I hoped would shed light on the circumstances surrounding the musician's disappearance. It was a mosaic of greed, power, and fear, a story that revealed how deeply the roots of corruption had entwined themselves in the industry's soil. I decided to take this story to the public, to bypass the gatekeepers who might seek to silence it. Utilizing underground channels and independent media outlets, I began to disseminate the information, sharing the musician's story and the dark truths of the industry. The response was immediate and powerful. Fans, fellow artists, and even some within the industry who had grown disillusioned with its practices, rallied to the cause. The musician's music, especially the unreleased tracks I had shared, became anthems of the movement, echoing his message and keeping his spirit alive. As the story gained traction, it began to draw attention from more mainstream channels. Documentaries were produced, investigative articles published, and discussions initiated about the need for change in the music industry. The musician's disappearance was no longer just a mystery, it had become a symbol of a much larger struggle. But with the spotlight came increased danger. The threats against me grew more frequent and more severe. I knew I was treading on dangerous ground, challenging forces that had operated in the shadows for far too long. Yet, the fear that gripped me was overshadowed by a sense of responsibility to my friend and to the countless artists who had suffered in silence. Amidst this whirlwind of activity, a breakthrough occurred. A former industry executive, weighed down by guilt and disillusionment, came forward with information. They corroborated much of what the anonymous insider had told me, providing details about the mechanisms used to control artists and the lengths to which the industry would go to protect its interests. However, concrete evidence about the musician's fate remained elusive. The truth about what happened to him that night, the specifics of who was responsible, and why it was carried out remained shrouded in mystery. The more I searched for definitive answers, the more I realized that the full truth might never be uncovered. Despite this, the impact of our efforts was undeniable. Conversations about reform and transparency within the music industry became more prominent. Artists began to speak out, sharing their own stories of manipulation and control. A movement had been sparked, one that sought to reclaim the music industry from the grip of those who valued profit over artistry. As I reflect on this journey, I am filled with a mix of sorrow and hope. Sorrow for my friend, whose voice was silenced too soon, and for the personal cost of this quest. Hope because his story has ignited a flame, a call for change that continues to burn brightly. The lullaby of the dark, the song of my friend's struggle, resonates now more than ever. It is a reminder of the cost of silence, of the importance of standing up against corruption and control. His music, his legacy, lives on not just as a memory, but as a beacon guiding the way towards a future where the voices of artists can be heard, loud and clear, in all their resounding truth. As I sit here, years after the journey began, the echoes of the past still resonate with me. The musician's disappearance and the subsequent quest for truth have become a defining chapter in my life, a story that continues to unfold even now. The music industry, much like the wider world, is a complex tapestry of light and shadow, of creativity stifled by control, and voices silenced by power. The musician's legacy lives on, not just in the memories of those who knew him, but in the ripples he created in the industry. His music, especially the tracks released posthumously, has inspired a new generation of artists who see in his story a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration. They sing his songs, carry his message, and in doing so, ensure that his voice, though silenced, is never forgotten. I've come to realize that some mysteries are destined to remain unsolved, their truths hidden in the mists of time and circumstance. The exact details of what happened to my friend that night may never be fully uncovered. But in searching for those answers, a greater truth was revealed about the nature of the industry and the often unseen struggle that artists face in pursuing their art. The movement for change in the music industry, sparked by the musician's story, has grown. It's a slow process, filled with setbacks and challenges, but the conversation has started. Artists, fans, and even some within the industry itself are calling for greater transparency, fairness, and respect for artistic integrity. It's a battle that continues, one that requires constant vigilance and determination. For me, the journey has been transformative. I began as a friend seeking answers and became a part of something much larger. The musician's disappearance thrust me into a role I never expected, as a voice in the fight against the darkness that can engulf those who dare to challenge the status quo. As I look back, I am filled with a sense of bittersweet melancholy. I lost a friend, a brother in arms, but in losing him, I found a purpose. His story, our story, is a reminder of the cost of silence and the power of a single voice to ignite a flame. The music industry, much like the world, is ever-changing. The struggle for the soul of art continues, a symphony of voices rising against the noise, each note a testament to the enduring power of music and the human spirit. And so, the lullaby of the dark continues to play, a haunting melody that speaks of loss, struggle, and hope. It is a song that belongs to all who dare to dream, to all who stand against the darkness. It is a song that remains unfinished.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the video. We highly recommend you watch the next video here. Oops. I'm waiting for you to click. Yes, you've clicked. Happy watching.